Hey everybody, this is Talking Real Estate with Mark and Terry. I am Mark Snipe from Coldwell Banker, HPW,
And I'm Terry Carpenter with Coldwell Banker, Howard Perry, and Walston.
and today we're at Esteemed Coffee here in Cary, North Carolina.
And we're talking about the home buying process.
So, Terry, how do we want to go about this? I feel like we should kind of go big picture, just kind of talk about what the buying process entails,
Okay.
and then kind of dig in as we discuss the different parts of the buying process.
Yeah, let's just look at the big picture overall. Go
Okay.
ahead and let's start.
So let's say, with the buying process, there's a kind of pre-search process that you have to start with where you want to find a lender because getting a pre-approval, like we talked about the last time,
Right.
is pretty important. So you want to talk to a couple of different lenders and shore up that relationship. And that could take about 30 days. I mean, it could be shorter, but just to go through the process to get pre-approved can take a week or two. Finding a good lender can take another week. So give yourself 30 days. And
Depends on
then,
how well organized you are.
correct,
I mean,
right,
everybody's a little different. You
correct.
may have it in a folder, you may have it on your phone. So, yeah, give yourself plenty of time to get
So,
your pre approval letter.
and like you said last time, you want to be organized. So the more organized you are, the easier this process will be.
Right.
So after the kind of pre-search process, then we'll have the search, and that could take a week, depending upon how motivated and what your budget is. To forever, but between a week and 4 months, generally, if you're motivated and you want to find a property, and then once your offer is accepted, then you have kind of the sprint to close, and that's kind of negotiable. So we
Right.
want to discuss kind of the process from when the search starts to when your offer is accepted to close,
Right.
right?
It can seem to drag along, but when you make that offer and it gets accepted, the clock starts ticking.
Yes,
And, there's a lot of things, a lot of moving pieces at that time. So we're going to cover a little bit of everything in
right,
today's episode.
right. And just to give a big picture of what the process is so you can know what to expect. Okay, so when the search process starts and you've determined what you're pre-approved for, that's a great point to kick off because now we'll know what we can afford and where we want to go. And we talked last time about wants and needs
Right.
and having criteria for your search process so that you know what you want. And that'll make it easier for when we are going through the search process, which can take time, and it'll help with the funneling and
Right. Yeah. You take that criteria of location, price, things you're looking for in the home, and then you're going to start eliminating until you kind of get, 3 to 5, 7 or 8. I don't. It depends on your circumstance, and then you're going to start actually going to look at these homes
right,
and seeing if they fit what you're looking for.
right. And again, when you go through each home, you kind of want to have a checklist of what you want, and with each home, you'll get a better idea of what you want. I think
Right.
sometimes things start to get clarified as you look.
Right. I
And
know with my buyers, I give them a sheet of their criteria, and we have a check box. And when they go in that house, then they check off how many of those criteria that house meets.
that's
I'm
cool.
looking at other things,
Right.
but that's their job, kind of while they're there. And if I got only one thing out of my whole 10, then this may not be a
May not
house
be.
that's going to fit. But
Yeah.
a lot of times you don't know from the
Until you look.
pictures
Yeah.
or from just seeing online, what you're looking at. So we like to go see it in
Yeah.
person.
And I also think sometimes your wants and needs may evolve
Hmm.
because you start to learn more about what you want when you see more properties. So I feel as I don't know if there's a rule of thumb, but I do think you probably want to see six properties. You don't want to I mean, at least six properties. You don't want to overwhelm, and then of course it depends on each person has their own tolerance,
Right.
or each candidate or client has their own tolerance.
Right, but to your point, I mean, that could be I could do it in a weekend. It may take you 3 or 4 or 5 months,
Yeah,
right? I mean, so just depending on the market, where you're looking at, things like that.
right.
But yeah, it's just a process again that's going to take a little bit of time. But being prepared and going in there knowing that
Right.
helps a lot.
So you have that pre-search process that you want to go to where you want to find a loan or a lender partner, and then you have the search process. And that the pre-search process could take up to 30 days, and then the search could take a week, a couple of days, a weekend, up to 4 months. So those are kind of the first two parts of the process. And then we get to the point where we get our offer accepted. Okay, so now we get to the exciting point, the happy point, where you submit an offer and voila, it gets accepted. That's a very exciting time, right?
You're under contract.
Yes,
Great.
those are magical words.
So now
right?
the pressure's on.
Right, and this is where the clock really starts to tick. It's kind of once your offer is accepted, then things really start to go. It's a sprint.
They do. So, I mean, you have to schedule your inspections. You have to determine your due diligence fee.
Right,
If
right.
there's one, there's a due diligence period. There's earnest money
Right.
involved. Pick a escrow agent, a
Right.
closing attorney. Lots of things start to
So I
go.
want to back up just a little bit. I feel like one of the things that we need to do as we get close and we're starting to put offers in is start to provide our clients with attorneys. You want to give maybe 2 or 3 options for them, because once the offer is accepted and the clock starts to tick, we need to ensure that we get an attorney, and then because we're going to be setting the closing date, and
Right.
that's part of the negotiation. So it's a little amorphous, but I feel as though having an attorney lined up around that period of time is important.
Absolutely. You have 7 days. When you make the contract, you're going to put a date in. You have 7 days to kind of adjust it, and it can be adjusted, but it's
Mhm.
very important to make sure you have that taken care of
Right.
when you submit that
And
contract.
that's a part of being organized.
Hmm.
And so once the offer is accepted, the negotiations start. And as Terry, you mentioned, you negotiate your due diligence period. You negotiate your due diligence money and your earnest money. And one of the most important things is how long that due diligence period is.
Right.
And I think in general, you want it to be between 2 to 3 weeks. I think that's standard.
There's
You
no
agree?
set time.
No.
I mean, you have to know. The one I dealt with before was around the holidays. I mean, mine stretched out, 30 plus days. So there's lots of things that you kind of have to consider. That being said, normally I'd say it's 21 days is kind of a typical due diligence period, and then the closing, the settlement time is 10 to 14 days after that.
Right.
So
And it's once we negotiate the due diligence period, then we have to get an inspection. We need to get a survey,
correct.
and we need to ensure that our lender gets an appointment for an appraisal.
Right. The lender will take care of the appraisal.
But I feel like it's our duty, ours as well as our clients, to stay on top of the lender and to ensure that has happened,
Yes.
because
the
that
most
could be a deal
important
breaker.
thing at
Yeah.
this point is to get to the closing table.
Right.
Because you've fallen in love with the property. The seller's under contract. They want everybody wants to get through this.
Right.
So everybody needs to do their part.
Right.
But you as the buyer, this is your opportunity to do your due diligence and inspect it. You may have to inspect the HVAC. You may have to do a mechanical engineer or an engineering inspection for the structural engineering. There's multiple things
There's a
you
lot
may
of
have
things,
to do.
right.
So giving yourself that 3-week time frame kind of is able to fit people in their schedules and still turn around. And if there's necessary repairs to negotiate repair costs
Right.
and get things done, there's still time typically.
And I guess we should back up a little bit, because once you get the inspection, which is very important for the buyer, generally, once you set the appointment for an inspector and they come out, they generally turn around a report in 24 hours up to 3 days. And so when you get that report, you determine what it is you would want the seller to take care of. And generally, you pick your top 3 to 5 things, and then you negotiate those with the seller. And you want to give the seller enough time to make those repairs before closing, or you negotiate compensation or concessions.
Right.
And so that's an important part of the due diligence period, is making sure that we schedule the inspector as quickly as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we get that report back, going back to our sellers and negotiating, if repairs are needed,
Right.
what those repairs will be, and to give the seller enough time
Right.
to consider them and make those repairs.
Contract says time is
Of the essence.
of the essence,
Yes,
and
yes,
that cannot be stressed enough.
yes.
I mean, this is the time that you have to get these things done, and the work for everyone is happening.
Right.
You as a buyer may not know all the moving pieces,
Right.
but we understand there's lots of things going on.
There are a lot of moving pieces, and again, organization is key. And
Yes.
we always have a plan of how we want to march through these, a very deliberate process. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure the process is seamless. But you have your inspection, which is a pretty important aspect. And generally, your attorney will order the survey. Now, why is the survey important?
Because it may be encroachments.
Yeah.
You may later on want to build a fence or put a storage unit or something on the property, and you'll have a survey that you can properly place it so that it's not encroaching on the neighbor's property.
Right.
It's a good idea, right? We always recommend a survey,
Yeah.
even for a townhome. I mean,
Yes.
you just never know
You never know.
what may be there.
Right. And I think it's one of those things that you should do. I mean, I don't know why someone wouldn't, because as Terry said, you can have encroachments. And the worst thing that can happen is you get to the close and you can't receive a marketable title. And so, what is a marketable title? That is essential for the lender to proceed with the loan. And so, I think it's very important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you have those, and the survey can take up to 4 weeks. Generally, that takes from the minute it is ordered, and generally arrives during closing or right before closing.
Yes, I mean those guys they're not that many of them. They're very far behind. So that is kind of something that you don't get to the last minute a lot of times.
Right.
But it's very, very important to do.
Mm-hmm. And so during the that's the due diligence period.
Yes.
And like we said, that could be 2 to 3 weeks. So you have certain things that you need to take care of during the due diligence period, and then hopefully things go smoothly. And if they don't, that's when either the seller will ask to extend, or, which is rare, or the buyer might request to extend. And again, that would have to be a conversation between the buyer and seller. But if all goes well, then we get to the closing. Before we move on to the closing, there is a difference when you're looking at new construction versus resale. Terry, I feel like you've kind of done some work on this.
I have. So, I've worked with buyers in the past doing buying new construction homes. The process is slightly different. You go and meet the on-site agent. Typically, they let you pick out the lot, the model, type of home, the elevation that you want to choose. You sign a contract then and make a deposit, and then after that, you kind of is a waiting period, a couple weeks. You get to go to the design center and pick out your cabinets and countertops and more detailed items. They'll ask you to make another deposit on that as well, and then it's a sitting wait time. I mean, again, we encourage people to get inspections even for new home construction.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if you're buying into new construction, you want to get an inspection, because there are issues with new construction. It's just that it's new, and so that's something. And you also would still want to get a survey if you're
Yes.
buying a new home, because again, what is marked on paper might be different in actuality. So that aspect you still want to get done. And I will say, with new construction, where we were talking about the clock starts ticking, is a little bit different with new construction.
Yes.
I don't want to say it's a more relaxed pace, but it's not like a resale. The process that we described was more resale, where you really, once your offer is accepted, the ball gets rolling pretty quickly. I think with new construction, it's a little bit more of a deliberate pace.
And a lot of things can get delayed.
Yeah.
The builder it could be bad weather for an extended period of time. It could be supply issues, right? So they're normally going to tell you right now they're running 6 to 8 months build time. They could push it a little bit out farther.
Mhm.
So again, it goes back to being prepared, knowing that it's a little bit different game when you're
Right.
when you're dealing with new construction.
Mhm.
You have to be. It's a long game versus
Right.
when the resale it happens fast.
Right. It's
So
quick.
this is a long drawn out process.
Okay.
But then after you get to picking out and make the deposits, then eventually after it gets finished and you get your certificate of occupancy, then you get to the settlement and closing table.
Right. All right. So let's move on to closing. Get to closing, but before, just want to give a quick review of what happens before we get to closing. So remember, we have that pre-search process where you just want to make sure that you find your lender. The search process can take, and that could take about 30 days. The search process, 1 week to 4 months. And then once the offer is accepted, generally it could be between 30 and 45 days. And that all depends. And then once we hit closing,
Closing typically takes about an hour after all the papers are signed. The title is sent to the county office that you're with, the register of deeds for that county. It gets recorded, and then the keys can be exchanged.
but one thing that I think we want to point out is, if possible, you want to schedule your closing early or midweek, because sometimes if there are delays, you don't want it to go over the weekend. You don't want to have to wait to get through the weekend, because that makes nobody happy.
There's a lot of moving pieces there. Again, you're getting utilities changed. You may be having movers.
Movers, that's a big
Yeah,
one.
so that's a big thing. So it's really important on a timing aspect to have the initial closing, if possible, during the middle of the week.
Yeah.
In case there is a delay, then you can just move it a couple of days and not interfere with the weekend or potentially a holiday or
Right.
something where somebody's not working that you need.
Right.
At
Exactly.
that point.
Exactly. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I guess the closing itself is really a formality, because at
It
that
is.
point, the listing agent and the buyer's agent have kind of hashed things out. There's something called the settlement statement, which just kind of lists who owes what at
Mhm.
closing, and then where funds will go, and check who will be receiving checks versus checks being cashed. And like Jerry said, your deed will be recorded. You'll get your title insurance, and it's a lot of the signing paperwork, really.
Yeah, the closing disclosure usually is delivered to the attorney 3 days prior.
Yeah.
That way they can check through the numbers again as well. But again, it's kind of a formality.
Right.
It's the signing and recording the deed and the process of transferring the title from one owner to the other.
Right. And then hopefully, like Jerry said, someone's given someone the keys.
That's right.
And we'll have a happy buyer and a happy seller. And so I feel like that's the process. Again, depending upon the search, it could be a short, kind of quick sprint, or it could be the marathon. It all depends. It all depends on what the market is like, kind of what is the buyer, how motivated the buyer is, what their wants and needs are. So there kind of are a lot of things that lead up to the whole search process, and the more organized, the better it'll go. I feel like that's the key. It's just organization.
Absolutely, it is being organized again. Understanding that your process is going to be a little different. I mean, there's a means to it. There's a process, but your situation will be unique. But that's kind of an overview of the process, and we did also throw in there when there's new construction versus resale.
Right.
So that's an important thing to look
It's
at.
a little
In our
bit of
area,
a
we have
wrinkle.
a huge influx
There
right
is.
now of new construction.
It's a lot of new construction.
Yeah.
All right, so that is Talking Real Estate with Mark and Terry. I'm Mark Snipe.
And I'm Terry Carpenter.
And today, again, we are at Esteemed Coffee here in Cary, North Carolina.
And we just wanted to give you an overview of the buying process.
And hopefully you found it helpful. And please visit and subscribe. And we look forward to helping.